I mean, think what would happen if half the people on Earth died tomorrow. The half of us that are still here are not going to be able to fix electrical lines at some point. We're going to lose power. You're not going to be able to keep the whole grid up. You might have somebody who's an electrician and has an idea what's going on, but what happens when that guy goes?
Out in the woods, shadows creep slow. Footprints deep where no man should go. Cold winds howl through hollers and brooks. Whispers of Bigfoot in the way it looks. Myths, monsters, and bullets in the night. Under a pale moon, strange glowing light. Truth out there like a blade it cuts. Myths, monsters, and bullets run amok.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. I am your host, John Methenkamp. If you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share, you can email me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com. And when I say paranormal, you know what I mean. UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, Bigfoot, anything weird, I want to hear it. mythsandmullets@gmail.com. The amount of support you guys have been giving me over the last couple months has been absolutely outstanding. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't yet, and you like the show, subscribe, like, comment, and share. Tell a friend about the show. If you don't like the show, tell an enemy about the show. Because obviously, if you don't like it, they will, and I'll still get a subscriber. After you're done with this episode, look at the description. You're going to find all my favorite podcasts down there. Nevermore Hollows, Drunken Cryptids, Chumming with the Spirits, and so much more. Speaking of those guys, we're all going to be at the Ohio Bigfoot Jamboree, October 4th, 2025, in Ada, Ohio. The Ohio Bigfoot Jamboree is put on by Cryptids of the Corn. Last year was a blast. This year is going to be even bigger and better because I'm going to be there, and the three that I just mentioned are going to be there. Come see me. Come see the rest of the guys. Get your picture taken. Find out a little bit about us. We'd love to see you there. Tonight's episode is a good one. It's part 2 with Brian Goddard. If you haven't yet, go back and listen to last week's episode because he had an amazing Sasquatch encounter back when he was a kid. You don't want to miss that. Tonight's episode is a continuation of our conversation where we talk about Dogman, UFOs, everything paranormal. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. We were still on the subject of Bigfoot, but I have a question for you. What do you think about the correlation between Bigfoot and UFOs? Because you hear reports of people who often see Bigfoot and they will see either strange lights or straight up UFOs.
Does seem to be a pattern. A lot of times they do. One succeeds the other. Here in Ohio, as well as a Sasquatch hotspot, we are also a UFO hotspot, particularly along Lake Erie, which, interestingly enough, where my parents live in Pennsylvania, is 20 minutes to the lake. And Ashtabula, the Ohio side of where we were, bumps up against Lake Erie. They have a massive coastline. So it's very possible. There have been a lot of sightings over the last couple decades there. There's still sightings sometimes in the Ashtabula area. There's sightings all along Lake Erie, which is another interesting fact because it does seem like a lot of UFO sightings have a correlation with water. Now, why is that? I don't know. I've heard different theories that they go underwater because they need fuel and they take something, do some process with the water. We're basically international interspatial truck stop, intergalactic truck stop, if you will, which maybe it makes sense. Hydrogen, power. I don't know, but it's also possible that much like us, if they take the Roswell Greys, for example, from the rumors that we've heard of them, aside from being gray, they have 2 eyes, 2 legs, two arms, 2 hands. I don't know if they necessarily have a nose or just an opening, and they have some kind of mouth. So if the ones that allegedly crashed, let's just go off the premise that they crashed. Some of them did survive. That means they can
to
breathe our
Wright-Patterson Air
atmosphere.
Force Base.
Yep. And that supposedly, so if they did survive, right, that would mean they could breathe. They could breathe our atmosphere. So I would assume that their biology, at least in some way, is kind of like ours. I'm not saying they have a heart, and I'm saying that they perhaps eat the similar things. They drink water. Water is the source of all life as far as we know, right? And we believe there was once water on Mars. And if there was once water, there was probably life. There's all sorts of theories that Mars used to be much like Earth. So if that's the case and water is the galactic source of life, then maybe that's why they're stopping. It's simply to refuel, not just water, but perhaps, or not just to take energy out of the water. Perhaps they're stopping because they simply require water just as much as we do. And Earth is certainly an abundance of water, so it's not hurting anything from a ship here or there taking a couple of gallons. You know, possibility, I don't know, but it does seem strange that they do correlate by water. It also seems strange that they coordinate by Sasquatch sightings as well. Are Sasquatches aliens?
Maybe.
I doubt it.
Maybe when they're at the truck stop, they're letting their dog out to pee. Because you see that all the time at the truck stops and at the rest areas. Yeah. You let your dog pee over here, and you go get your refreshments over here, and we all meet back at the car.
Well, that would be, I would say that's an excellent explanation for Dogman.
Absolutely. I
They're
love
their dogs
me
out
some
just like we
Dogman.
do.
Have you ever seen a Dogman?
I wish, no.
I said this my episode on cryptid creatures just dropped today, as of this recording, 6/9 on YouTube.
Right.
It dropped yesterday on the podcast players, but I said this on there. I don't want to see a Dogman, but I want to see a Dogman. I want to see a Dogman from like my car with a high powered rifle next to me, and I want a clear path away from it. Because I've never heard of a really good encounter with a Dogman. And I could be wrong. I'm just talking about the encounters I've taken. I've never heard of a good one. Have you?
No, I've never heard of one. I've never talked to anyone who's necessarily had a good one, nor have I ever watched a documentary that talks about a positive encounter with them. They generally seem to be much more aggressive than Sasquatches are, at least the ones down here, not so much in Alaska. But they seem to be much more territorial, perhaps. Almost more animal than human. Where a Bigfoot, Sasquatch, they almost seem to walk a very fine line where they're almost just a little bit more human than they are animal. But the Dogman seems to be the opposite of that, where they're much more instinctual, they're much more predatory, and more or less we're just the next meal.
Did you ever hear that encounter? I think it was in Youngstown with the guy in like the old steel mill. You ever hear that along the railroad tracks? No, I'm gonna find it and I'll send it to you.
Oh, please do. Yeah, I know there was. I can never remember if it's Defiance or Alliance.
Defiance, the Defiance Dogman. Yes.
Yeah, there were a rash of sightings around there.
Yeah, back in the 70s, and it made the newspaper. And I can put links in the description of this episode of where you can find these newspaper clippings. But that one was weird because one of the reports, the Dogman was wearing clothes.
So it's interesting you say that because I can't believe these words are about to come out of my mouth, but I've recently been watching documentaries about werewolves, and I try to keep an open mind as a researcher, investigator. You can't close anything on. Anything is possible. Anything could be out there. There's so much we don't understand. Could a werewolf exist? I would like more information. But I have recently been reading about it, and people have had unusual encounters that could fit that description. I think some of the documenters maybe just taking a few liberties here and there. I'm not necessarily seeing the dots connect, but I'm not saying that's not happening either.
There's
And
also
I don't know that.
reports though of Sasquatch stealing clothes and putting them on though too. But that's like older, like in the 1800s. So you got to question whether it was the times where they weren't talking about genitalia in the newspaper. So they were like, well, this hairy man, and to avoid the question of was it male or female, well, we couldn't tell because it had clothes on, because it stole clothes off Jane's clothesline before it got solved. So I don't know, but there are reports of people saying Sasquatch is stealing their clothes. So could Dogman be doing the same thing?
Sure. I mean, if you go back to Native American lore, some of them essentially are skinwalkers. They can change their shape. They can take the appearance of different animals. Despite how we like to think of ourselves, we are in fact animals. We may be at the top of the kingdom, but we're still animals. So
Right.
if they can take the shape of something else, who's to say they can't take the shape of us? Now, is that a biological process? Is that something that would fall under the supernatural realm of a level of science that we don't understand? Or are we seeing something that's not necessarily happening? It's appearing to us that we're seeing because they're using some form of technology from, as we talked about, our extraterrestrial friends that seem to be floating around. If you really want to go down the rabbit hole, as far as extraterrestrials and Sasquatches go, you can go back to the Anunnaki 7,000 years ago, and Babylon and Mesopotamia, Samaria, where they all have their own legends, not only of Sasquatch, but they also talk about the Anunnaki and other beings that came from the sky. So this is not necessarily a new thing. This is all the way through recorded history. There's some kind of unexplainable event. And again, if we take it back to what language was available in ancient Samaria, in Mesopotamia, and Babylon. You see something come out of the sky. You saw a ship. What would you call it? Perhaps a chariot, right? Perhaps they're gods because gods live in the sky, so they must be gods, and they're in a chariot. If they would use terms that they could explain it, because we as humans, we have a nature, we have to put it into a box. So they would explain it, they would define it. And then they know what it is. And then everybody can know what it is. Because that's what we have to do. And then we have to tell everybody that we've discovered something. You know what I mean? So the hairy man, as they were once called, or wild man, as they've often been called through history, if you trace that back, almost every culture on Earth has some story of a wild man or a hairy man. And you find them in, as far back as we have recorded history, you find legends of these things. You find offhand descriptions in ancient languages of something. So maybe they've been here, both have been here all along. Perhaps the UFOs are watching them for some reason, and perhaps they're the reason we don't know about them. Perhaps they don't want us to know. The one thing I will say that's different is UFOs, as far as we can tell, like to go out of their way to make sure we don't see them. People oftentimes have trouble remembering. Sometimes years go by, and then it's not until somebody has night terrors and then they go see a hypnotherapist and then, spend weeks in therapy unlocking memories and realize that something possibly happened to them that they can't explain. But then, there'll be physical evidence. There's scars that they have no recollection of, that their parents don't know about, their spouse doesn't know where it came from. But it wasn't always there. But when it was there, it just went from not there to scar. How does that happen? We can't explain that, And if it's something like, I cut my hand, there's a little scar, you might not think much of it. But people have found pieces of metal inserted that we can't explain why they're there, what it is, but somehow it's in somebody's leg and there's no evidence of how it got there. So it does seem like if that is in fact what they're doing, they don't want us to know about them. Sasquatches don't necessarily seem to, it's clear they want to avoid us, but it doesn't seem like they are going out of their way. If they're passing through, they're passing through. If we see a glimpse of one, they don't make a big issue out of it.
Right.
But perhaps it's not them that's doing the hiding. Perhaps there's something else watching them that is making the disappearing act happen.
Maybe Earth is like a terrarium or a zoo for the aliens, and they're like, we have this endangered species and we need to put it on Earth so it can repopulate, and then we're going to take it back to where it originally came from. Maybe. Sure. I just made that all up.
As good as any. I mean, here's the thing, because you go back to the portals and tying in the two, we're assuming UFOs are coming from outer space typically, but what if that's not the case? What if they're coming from another dimension? And perhaps the Sasquatch is simply something that occasionally passes through their portal. And they are, in fact, from another dimension, and they're just simply passing through, and they understand how to use those corridors. And that's why there's not as many of them here as wherever it is they come from. You know, and maybe it's an accident. Maybe that's why there's so few of them. Maybe they're crossing through something they're completely unaware of, and then they end up here and can't figure out how to get back. Now, there's how many thousands of people go missing every year with no explanation.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of them are locked in somebody's basement or buried in their backyard or whatever the case may be. But there's probably some that, I don't know. You know, it's possible that some of those people, you have a lot of disappearances in national parks, things like that. Is there something else going on? Maybe they don't keep track of it, interestingly enough, in national parks because they don't want to scare people on the percentage of you missing. But if you really do some research, or if you watch the Y files, I'll put up the statistics, and it's a little bit frightening how many people vanish in national parks every year without a trace.
Yeah.
Or if you watch Missing 411.
Love that. Love it.
I love that guy. Because if you remember when he talked about the possibility of an alien correlation and a Sasquatch correlation. And frankly, both have merit. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was the disappearances of the hunters, where not only do they disappear, but all their stuff. The gun disappears. What use would any animal have for a gun?
Right. Or that one that was out in Montana, I believe, where he went missing, and then like 2 years later, they found his pack and his gun leaned up against the fence.
Yep.
But they had already found his shoe with his foot still in it, like a year before. So how did that pack and that gun get down here?
Well, and that's the other thing is the one guy. Remember the one guy that was walking through the snow, and they said that he had hypothermia and his shoes were soaked. But then when they found I think they found his shoes, and they would look like they were brand new. Yeah. What happened to them? And why did they find him miles away that he could not have possibly made it through 2 feet of snow? And, another point that they make on that is some of these guys who disappear are avid lifelong hunters. There was the one guy that spent 50 years teaching survival classes and hunting classes. You're going to tell me that somebody gets the jump on a guy like that in the woods?
Right. Right.
That
he
like
went
that,
out unprepared.
Yeah. Somebody like that is a predator himself. Those guys can survive anywhere. So you're telling me that some animal got the drop on him after all those years, or some person got the drop on him that he didn't fight back, that he doesn't know how to pick his gun up on short notice and aim quickly enough to get a shot off that's going to wound someone or something. Right. I just always found that, there was a lot of things about that particular case I found weird. And when they talk about the Sasquatch angle, that makes a little bit more sense from what we know. They can just kind of turn on you. And frankly, seeing something like that, maybe the guy froze.
Right. Speaking of that, what about those two guys that went missing outside of Portland just last Christmas?
I didn't read about that too much.
Really?
No.
Huh. We'll talk offline about that then.
Yeah. Yeah, I had some medical issues last year, so I missed a lot towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I'll send you some information on that.
Yeah, please do.
That's a weird case too. Let's just say two guys go missing who were Bigfoot hunting, searching, whatever you want to call it, investigating. They went out on Christmas Eve. They were found, their bodies were found like 2 days later. And the exact same day that they were found, the search and rescue warehouse or whatever, everything got stolen that night.
How bizarre.
Just a coincidence though, right? I'll send you the info on that. But anyway, going back to the Native American thing, And now we're going to talk aliens and UFOs and grays. Have you ever seen that video of the tribe from the Amazon, South America, where they're in their native garb? Pretty sure they're wearing like a loincloth, and they show them a picture of a gray alien, and they didn't know what an alien was. Like, they were trying to describe it, and they like, no, we don't know, but they show them a picture of it, and they're like, oh, those are the ant people. Like, immediately,
Yep.
That's the ant people. They come out of the mountain. So maybe that goes back to the portal thing. Well, maybe they're not coming out of outer space. They're maybe coming out of the ground or out of the portal in the mountain.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the ant people supposedly fled the destruction of Lemuria, and they went to Mount Shasta in California, which today is a UFO hotspot. It is a Sasquatch hotspot. It is a paranormal hotspot, and it is just plain weird hotspot. Even the makeup of the mountain, the geology of it doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to be like that. Mountains shouldn't have the levels of rock and the density that it has, and no one can explain why that is. And the local native population at Mount Shasta, according to their oral history, there were multiple events, one of which was a great flood, interestingly enough, and the ant people took them in. And when they came back out into the world, they taught them how to survive out here, because the landscape had changed. They showed them how to survive, and they taught them things when they lived in the mountain with them. And then when it was safe to come out again, the ant people, and then according to their oral history, this happened twice, where these people, these beings that they would refer to as the ant people, helped their ancestors survive some great disaster.
We'll look into that one. I haven't heard those.
Yeah. Supposedly, if you Google Mount Shasta, I can send you stuff. I'll send it. It's fascinating. Right. Yeah. But the Lemurians, when that was supposed to be a continent there, like Atlantis, it was somehow destroyed, and its people were spread. But if you look at, speaking of the Amazon, there are pyramids, right? There are pyramids in Egypt. But if you look at the design of the pyramids, they all point to stars. They're physically similar. They're built the same. However these cultures did it, the technique appears to be the same, which that's not possible, right? Because we know that they couldn't have crossed oceans to meet each other at that time. The height, the width of the passageways, and what they were used for. How did everyone come up with a pyramid? Now the
naysayers and those who don't believe in the paranormal or anything like that, they're like, well, that's just the most efficient way to stack stones. Well, why were they stacking the stones?
Yeah, well, how efficient is it? Like the Great Pyramid in Giza, it's exactly 400 feet tall on the dot, and it's designed and built within a 98% accuracy. Okay, I don't think we could do that today.
You ever see the video where the group from Japan tried to make a 1/10 model using
yeah, they can't,
and they couldn't do it. They ended up trying to even make it half of that and still couldn't do it without bringing in cranes and stuff like that. Yeah, don't give me that crap.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, let's say they had 5,000 people carrying a block up. How do you measure that? How did they know that one section of ground might settle but another wouldn't? You know what I mean? Because you got to figure, if we're talking anywhere from 3,000 to 7,000 year old pyramids, who knows for sure, how would they measure exactly 400 feet high? How would the width, the hallways, the passages be the same width, the same height? How could it be 98% perfect? Because, they're actually 8-sided, not 4. It's just the shadow makes them look 4-sided. How the hell would they make 8-sided pyramids? And remember, the triangle is not a natural shape. It doesn't appear in nature. Nothing grows as a triangle. So they would have had to not only come to that conclusion on their own, but someone would have to sit there and say every block has to be exactly these dimensions. Otherwise, they're not going to be even, right? One will be longer than another. One will be thicker than another. One will be lighter than another. But they're not. They're identical. And they're exactly 400 feet high. on the dot. How do you make that calculation? Not only that, how do you design it in a way that 3,000 years is going to pass by and it doesn't change?
And not only that, none of the rocks came locally.
Yeah.
They were taken from 100 miles away or whatever, and brought there. So you're telling me those same people that carried those stones up there, they walked with that thing for how many miles? No. Are you telling me they had that many ships that they could float them up the Nile? No. There ain't no way.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's something or someone had to help them.
Yeah.
And how come all these other cultures developed almost, I don't want to say identical, but take it for example, a house in New Mexico, Arizona, right? They're typically ranches. They're a lot of stucco. They have a different style of building. They're probably typically ranches because heat rises. And so why would you build a 2-story house in a desert? You would, right? But the same thing is, if let's say the Lumerians or the Atlanteans or whoever, something happened and they spread out across the world, they would have their own style of building. It may not be exactly the same, but you would recognize a house and be like, oh, that's a house. That's a Cape Cod. That's a bungalow. That's a split level. That's a colonial. That's a ranch. That's a Tudor. You know what I mean? But I would know it's a house. And then the same thing could very well be true with these pyramids, that there was some civilization. Now, how advanced they were, I couldn't tell you. But if they were advanced enough, they might have the ability to at least do the math. They might know how to use pulley systems and leverage different things with physics that they would not have known in Egypt that could have aided in there. You know what I mean? Even let's say, for example, they were an advanced technological race. That's one of the more modern theories, both the Lumerians and the Atlanteans. And then the question always is, well, if they were so technological, why weren't they flying around in UFOs, and why did they rebuild their civilization? And the answer is very simple. I could drive a car or pretty much any vehicle, but I couldn't put together an engine.
Right.
I could change the oil, but I can't change the transmission. In fact, I could change the oil if there was a filter and somebody handed me 6 quarts of oil, but I wouldn't be able to make the filter. I would have no idea how to do that. I wouldn't know how to make plastic. I wouldn't, you know what I'm saying? So if these civilizations existed and they were more advanced, and we're always assuming, well, they would have all this technology. No, they would. Because once it breaks, how do you fix it? Once the parts, where does it go? So if you're avoiding, if you're fleeing a natural disaster, right? You're going somewhere else. You're going to take what you can take that's going to help you survive. You're not necessarily going to take the blueprints of how to build an intergalactic spaceship, right? So perhaps what these pyramids are is their way of keeping something of their culture left, because that's the only thing that they could do with the tools that they had. But they had knowledge enough to do some more things that the local populations wouldn't have had, but they don't have the knowledge, the skill set, the tools to make plastic or whatever they would have used. You know what I mean? Just like we would. I mean, think what would happen if half the people on Earth died tomorrow. The half of us that are still here are not going to be able to fix electrical lines at some point. We're going to lose power. You're not going to be able to keep the whole grid up. You might have somebody who's an electrician and has an idea what's going on, but what happens when that guy goes?
Right.
Well,
you can just look at any natural disaster. Okay, power goes out and everybody freaks out. Okay, because they well, why didn't you just build a generator in your house? Well, why didn't you create a water pump to get water going again? And that goes back to what you're saying. Just because a civilization has a certain technology doesn't mean every individual in that civilization has the knowledge or the technology to do these things.
And look at what's happening with us right now with AI, computers. We're sacrificing the knowledge of simple tasks, right? Because a computer can do it better. Well, then what happens in 2 generations when you ask someone to do that task? They're not going to have a clue because the computer's been doing it their entire life, right? Just like how if you take a car manual from 1950 versus one from now, the one from now says, go to the auto zone and have them check your sensors and it'll tell you what's wrong and then take it to the dealer. It's like 3 pages long. And then the rest of it, the 35 pages, are all legal disclaimers so that you can't actually get anything fixed, and you have no repercussion, and they basically own you.
Right.
Whereas in 1950s, it would say, oh, this could be the result of a radiator leak. Here's how you change the radiator. Here's how you change your brake pads. Here's how you change this. Here's how the steering column works. Have we gotten a lot more advanced with cars? Sure. You can get one now that'll drive you around the clock, But how would you fix that car? What if it breaks down? What do you do to fix that? And if 100 years from now there's no mechanical vehicles left and it's all computerized, well, then it means there's no auto shop. That means no one learned to work on cars. And from what I've been reading, Tesla wants to have all their plants automated in the next 10 years. They want to have machines even building that, and then someone repairs the machines. But that's all supposedly going to be software, right? There's going to be very few people that manufacture the machines because they're going to manufacture themselves. So that knowledge is gone forever. We lose it. So if a disaster happens and we have this great technology, and then we could go, okay, we're going to go to this island. Great. Now what? Eventually the Tesla's going to die, and then that's it. We don't know how to build an electric grid. We don't know how to even make another Tesla. We don't even know how to build a tire. We have no idea what to do.
I mean, ask any kid right now how to use a rotary phone. Seriously, they don't know how to use a rotary phone.
There's a video on Facebook where they put it in there and they're trying to figure out how it works, and they have no idea what's going on. They're looking upside down.
Yeah,
completely clueless.
Yeah, like they're trying to put their fingers in the holes and thinking they're pressing buttons, and it's like, but that's basically one generation.
Yeah.
It's our kids that don't know how to do this thing. So it wouldn't take long for people to not know how to make fire, not know how to make all the things that we take for granted.
Well, that's a great idea. A great example right there. How many people can go out and make a fire? I mean, honestly, if I asked my wife right now, she would be like, yeah, I know exactly how to do it. I'm going to bother you until you do it until you're cold. You know what I'm saying? That's probably half the population's response is, everybody, oh, I'd be fine. My uncle's a survivalist, or my best friend can do this. Well, but if you can't do it, are you going to be fine? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you catch up with your best friend. Maybe your best friend's that smart that he's long since gone, and you're way behind because he knows how to survive and he knew what he needed to take, and he saw the situation, said, I'm getting the hell out of here. Anyone who's right here can come with me. The rest of you on your own. Nothing malice, but just simple fact that some people who have that skill set are going to act faster. But long story long, with the Lemurians and the Atlanteans is they have this level of technology. They're able to escape this disaster. But then what? The technology's gone in a generation at most. And you're talking perhaps thousands of years, even tens of thousands of years when these civilizations were destroyed. So, how long before, if you put a car in a field and somebody doesn't go near it for 100 years, how much of that car is going to be left? Right? What about 1,000 years? Probably nothing, right? So what happened to their technology? I imagine it took an energy source. It probably stopped working. They couldn't fix it. They didn't know how to maintain it. Nobody knew how they built it to begin with. And they essentially had to start over. And they may have known how to make fire. They may have known how to make pulleys and some other basic things. And they had an understanding of physics, but no way to apply it. I can do math, but I couldn't design a building. I have a general understanding of geometry from 10th grade that I didn't do very well in. So I would certainly not recommend anyone go in my building because it'll collapse. But I understand the principle of architecture, but I wouldn't go out and be able to build something without a blueprint and someone probably to help me read it correctly. So and then that's the thing with the UFOs. Are they remnants of civilizations that have gone inside the mountain? Maybe. Perhaps some of them did survive and they were able to teach themselves over generations. Perhaps they had colonies in a mountain. Perhaps they knew something was coming. And that's why they had settlements to begin with in those mountains. And that's where they've hidden. And I guess it goes back to the same thing. If you are another species that evolved on this planet, another sentient species that's just as advanced as us, but not perhaps in this case, thousands of years further along, and you live inside a mountain, would you make contact with us knowing the first thing that we will probably do? And I'm not saying the United States or any particular country. I'm just saying one of them, someone's going to launch a bomb. And, do you want, and then you either respond or you don't. But why put yourself in that position? If you have the ability to coexist without interfering with us, there's different theories about the hollow earth theory. And that even goes back to Sasquatches. There's a cave in Kentucky that has a lot of mythology behind it. The local Native Americans there say it's the portal to the underworld. It's the largest cave in the world. It has never been completely mapped. As far as it goes is like 2 miles down, and then it goes into a chamber that's filled with water. And no one's been dumb enough, willing to dive and try to get to the bottom of this thing and see if there's another chamber, because they think there's more chambers in there, but it's all underwater. Personally, I don't think I would want to go swim in the dark and see another chamber in a cave that's 2 and some miles down into the ground where there could be something living that I've seen in a movie somewhere, like a giant spider or something that's going to eat me. This would not be my first, I would probably wait till somebody else did it. But let's just say that there are portals and that's how they're getting in. They would be able to monitor us, right? They would know what we're doing, who we are, what we're like, what we've done to this world. And if they're able to live underground because that's how they avoided some kind of natural disaster, maybe that's where they come from to begin with. And they discovered this big forest down there. There's no animal life, but there was plant life and there was insect life and things like that. But my question is, if that can exist, and there's all sorts of theories of how it exists. Same thing with the cave in Vietnam. It had clearly been there for thousands of years with a rainforest in it. And there's all sorts of explanation. Oh, there's underground water, light reflects off this and that. Okay, well, if all that can exist, who's to say there's not more?
Right.
And how would we know? We've never really looked for it, as far as I know. You know what I mean? The governments of the world haven't, or they're not telling us. And, again, if you're at that level of technology, why would you communicate with us? We're nothing but a risk. Right. And recently they've said there's enough water trapped beneath the Earth's surface to come out somewhere between 5 and 7 oceans. They're not actual oceans. They're trapped. The water is trapped. But that amount of water is down there. And just because they don't think it's hollow or there's something else in there, well, how's the water there? Right. If that must be a hollow space for water. Who knows what's evolved down there? And you could take it one step closer to us and say even the ocean's floor. The ocean makes up the majority of the planet. We barely scrape 5% of the ocean. Most of the time, like the Mariana Trench, we can't even get to the bottom of it. A good portion of the ocean floor is ginormous. It's bigger than any continent. And we're still discovering things on Earth on the surface, and we haven't even touched what could be in the ocean, what could have evolved on the ocean floor. Just because we can't survive the pressure, we know that an octopus goes down there. We know there are fish that exist down there. They survive the pressure. Who knows what else could have evolved down there? And the other thing, too, is evolving under the water like that, you're safe from natural disasters for the most part. Something that scorches the earth, who cares? There's no sunlight down there to keep anyways. They wouldn't even know. You know what I mean? Right. But they wouldn't necessarily even know what's going on the surface. They're so deep down. If they're adjusted to that level of pressure, kind of like if you go scuba diving, you come up too fast, they have to put you in a hyperbaric chamber. Whatever lives down there could very possibly be limited by something similar because they've adapted to that level of pressure. Their body may require that. It may not. But if they've evolved on this planet, if they can breathe water, it's very possible they could breathe air too. I don't know. There's so many explanations.
Right. We've been going for about 2 hours now. Right. It flies. It flies. What would you say to coming back for another interview at a future date?
No, anytime.
Yeah. I think because I feel like we could keep talking for about another 2 hours. Yeah. So, Brian, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
You can find me at cryptidparanormal.com. I'm on Facebook as Cryptid Paranormal, Instagram, and TikTok. Cryptidparanormal.com, of course, is the best way. You can email me there. My phone number's there. My blogs are there. Some of the encounters I've had. I have an encounters page where people send things in. Whenever someone sends something in to me, I copy it from the email, I paste it, and I drop it in their words as they wrote it. Make up your own opinion if you believe it or not. Do your own research. It's entirely up to you. I just put people's stories out there. So if you've seen something and you want to be anonymous, or you just want your first name, whatever the case, I'm happy to honor that. Just send it in. I'll drop it and people can make up their mind. But yeah, please do check me out at cryptidparanormal.com.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, I appreciate you coming on. And if you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share, you can either get a hold of Brian, or if you want to come on my show, you can email me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com. You can leave a comment on one of my videos. We'll figure out a way to get a hold of you. Or you can find me on Facebook, TikTok, most podcast players. Just look for Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. And until next time, I'll talk to you later. Gotta go.
Shadow in the pines lurking in the dusky air. Bigfoot stomps through the woods like he don't care. Lights in the sky flash green then blue. Aliens descending with a secret or two. Whispers in the breeze, cold fingers down your spine. Ghosts in the graveyard, twisting through time. Eyes wide open in the dead of night. The myths and monsters giving one hell of a fright. Oh, Myths, Monsters, and Mullets podcast, spinning wild tales of a future and a past. Hosted by John Methenkamp's fiery soul. He takes us where the wild unknown flows. Oh, Myths, Monsters, and Mullets podcast, spinning wild tales of a future and a past. Hosted by John Methenkamp's fiery soul. He takes us where the wild unknown flows. Down by the bayou, you hear a raspy growl. Swamp gas glowing as the coyotes howl. A UFO zipping just above the trees, grabbing hold of wonder like a southern summer breeze. Some call it crazy, others call it a lie. But listen real close as the truth passes by. The lines are blurry, the story's bold. John Methenkamp spins them into southern gold. Apparitions dancing in the smoky haze. Legends of the deep south told in hollers and bays. Bigfoot runs free, chasing shadow dreams. Aliens keep secrets like moonlight beams. No. Down by the bayou, you hear a raspy growl. Swamp gas glowing as the coyotes howl. A UFO zipping just above the tree.